For years, this sleepy retirement community near the San Jacinto Mountains was known as a pastor's graveyard. People came to the valley to live out a life of ease, and they wanted to be left alone. But underneath this laid-back lifestyle, there lurked a dark side.
The community's problems had an underlying spiritual basis to them, and the valley was very seated in cult and occultic activity.
Cults weren't the only problem. Neighborhood youth gangs had plagued the Hemet suburb of San Jacinto for decades. Pastor Gordon Houston's San Jacinto Assembly of God Church sits on the very street that's home to the town's notorious First Street Gang.
There are kids whose dads and grandfathers were a part of the First Street Gang. And so this is something that has perpetuated itself throughout the generations.
It turns out the Hemet Valley was also a major drug center. At least 9 methamphetamine labs operated out of the area.
I've actually had law enforcement officers transport methamphetamine for me in their police cars.
Hemet's spiritual turnaround did not come easily. Neither the Becketts nor the Houstons were early valley enthusiasts.
And I never really wanted to be there. I mean, we're out in the middle of nowhere, 18 miles from the closest freeway in a valley. My wife and I, Susan and I, had our emotional bags packed all the time, waiting for the day that God would somehow call us out of this valley.
The Houstons didn't even unpack their bags when they arrived in town.
We had our little baby, 6-month-old baby, in a Pinto runabout with no air conditioning and vinyl seats. And we drove down the street, we looked at the church and said, no thank you.
God began to speak to my wife and I, speak to me one day and said, would you spend the rest of your life in this valley for me? And God couldn't have asked a worse question of me. Would I spend the rest of my life in a valley I didn't love, I didn't care for, I didn't want to be a part of?
And God said, no, I've got a plan. I have got a plan if you will make a commitment to this place.
Filled with a new passion for his community, Beckett joined several men for a night of prayer and fasting in a nearby mountain cabin. It proved to be a powerful experience.
We knew we had touched something in the realm of the Spirit that would be very significant for our valley. It was at that point things began to escalate spiritually.
Researchers started to feed intercessors fresh information on the problems plaguing the community.
The intercessors in our church have been able to use spiritual mapping to help them focus on issues. If you don't know where the problem is, you can't evaluate it.
Spiritual mapping brings us to a place of knowledge and information. If I have a base of issues that I know are strongholds within my city, then God has the ability to speak something into my heart to say, gather the intercessors and go after this now.
Soon, a chorus of informed intercession was yielding impressive results. Cult membership, once a serious threat, has sunk to less than 0.3% of the population. The Church of Scientology is still present, but many other groups are long gone. Not long ago, a leader of the First Street Gang burst down the center aisle of Gordon Houston's church during a morning worship service.
I'm standing up preaching, and here comes this gang member, and tattooed up, and he's walking right to the platform with some pretty intense force, and I didn't know what was going on, and so I kind of kept preaching until he got real close, and he just stopped, and he looked up at me, and he said, I want to get saved right now.
Soon, all the inhabitants of the notorious First Street Gang house were converted, and one of their first outward acts was to remove graffiti from vandalized church walls. According to Sonny, Hemet's drug trade has dropped by as much as 75%. He gives much of the credit to intercessors.
They took a multi-million-dollar drug corporation and made it run with its tail between its legs.
Drug dealers and gang members aren't the only ones getting saved in the Hemet Valley. Church attendance now stands at about 14%, double what it was just 10 years ago.
Now we have a professing mayor, a professing police chief, professing fire chief, professing city manager, down through the ranks.
Lately, everybody's conversation to me has been, I don't know how you do it. How do you do it? Because the attack is great. I feel God called me to this and he hasn't told me to quit yet, or he hasn't shut the door. Instead, I see him opening doors to more churches, more people, more Christians, to really bring them together and say, you know, you want Christians in leadership, so now you have them, now you have to support them, and the only way to support them is through prayer.
Beckett estimates about 30% of local law enforcement and an exceptional number of high school teachers, coaches, and principals are now believers.
You name it, God has just turned the school system around, and to the point where we used to be one of the laughingstock school districts, where nobody wanted to send their kids to school in the San Jacinto School District. Now our students have some of the highest academic ratings and one of the lowest dropout ratings in all of the western United States.
And the school and all parts of the community have become a place where everybody works together, and it's a spiritual place, and we've taken on the battles of the dark side and drawn the line and said that we're going to reclaim the community, and that's what we're about.
I opened the doors of my
Recently, several dozen Hemet area churches co-sponsored a Convoy of Hope, where thousands of residents received free food, clothing, and medical exams. They also got a good dose of God's love.
It's probably, without a doubt, one of the greatest things to hit our valley in recent years. This is what church is all about. It's not about sitting inside the four walls of our building. It's about going in and touching the lives of people where they are.
Attracted to this proactive love, more than 300 people gave their hearts to Christ.
Hemet's not a perfect town, and it probably never will be, but Hemet is definitely in the process of transformation. Transformation is taking place. It is not the same community it was in the past.